The moment I discovered my wife's infidelity was like stepping into a frigid abyss, where the cold air stung my lungs and the bitter taste of betrayal overwhelmed me. It was a Thursday evening, and I had just returned home from work, exhausted yet eager to spend time with her. The house was quiet, too quiet, and as I walked through the living room, I noticed her phone lying on the coffee table. My instinct told me something was off. I picked it up, and through sheer curiosity, or perhaps a morbid sense of intuition, I unlocked it. What I found sent a shockwave through my entire being. Text messages exchanged with a man named Derek, the manager of a ski resort she had visited just a few weeks prior, painted a vivid picture of their affair. Words like "miss you" and "can't wait for the next trip" twisted like a knife in my gut. Each new message felt like a layer of ice forming around my heart, suffocating and heavy. As I read through the messages, I felt a myriad of emotions surge within me: anger, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. I had trusted her. We had built a life together, shared dreams, and even planned our future. I had always thought our love was unbreakable, but here I was, staring at the proof that shattered that illusion. I felt the walls closing in, the air thickening around me. How could she do this? How could she betray me so casually? I threw the phone on the couch, feeling the weight of disbelief settle in. I paced the room, my mind racing. My heart was pounding, and I was hyper-aware of every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the clock. I felt like a stranger in my own home. A place that once felt warm and inviting now felt like a prison of my own making. Before this, our relationship had its strengths and weaknesses like any other. We had shared laughter, dreams, and countless memories. Yet there were cracks: the late nights at work, the subtle distance that began to grow between us. I had tried to ignore them, to believe that our love would endure. But now I could see those cracks had turned into chasms, and she had chosen to leap into the arms of another man. I thought of her, Jessica. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had a way of lighting up a room. But she was also impulsive, often seeking thrills and excitement beyond our quiet suburban life. I had always admired her zest for life, but now I saw it as a double-edged sword. It was that same desire for adventure that had led her to the ski resort and to Derek. In the days that followed my discovery, I found myself lost in a whirlwind of emotions. I felt betrayed and angry, but more than that, I felt a simmering need for revenge. I wanted her to feel the pain she had inflicted on me. I wanted her to suffer the consequences of her actions. And so, I began to plan. I knew she had another trip to the ski resort scheduled for next month. The thought of her heading back to the same place where she had betrayed me filled me with a dark sense of purpose. I decided then that I would make sure that her next getaway was a disaster. I wanted her to experience the chaos and despair that I felt in my heart. I began to devise a plan. My first step was to get in touch with the resort. I had to ensure that Derek would be there, that he would be the one to greet her and drive her around the slopes. I wanted to create an atmosphere of tension and discomfort. I envisioned her arriving, excited and carefree, only to be met with the ghost of her choices lurking around every corner. I didn't want to just ruin her trip. I wanted to unravel the very fabric of her happiness. I wanted her to feel regret, to question everything about her decision to betray me. I justified my actions to myself by thinking that I was merely allowing her to face the consequences of her choices. After all, she had made her bed. Now it was time for her to lie in it. As I plotted, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. What would happen when she arrived at the resort? Would she see the chaos I had orchestrated? Would she realize the extent of her betrayal? I found myself consumed by these thoughts, my mind racing with possibilities. I knew I was walking a fine line between revenge and self-destruction, but the thrill of plotting her downfall was intoxicating. With each passing day as the trip approached, I could feel the tension building inside me. I was no longer the man who had trusted and loved Jessica. I was now a stranger, a man fueled by betrayal and a desire for retribution. And then the day finally came. I watched as she packed her bags, blissfully unaware of the storm I had set in motion. I felt a sense of satisfaction mixed with trepidation. Would she realize what I had done? Would she come to understand the depth of her betrayal? As she walked out the door, I couldn't help but wonder if this trip would be the end of our marriage or the beginning of something darker. The days leading up to Jessica's trip felt like an eternity. I spent hours meticulously planning every detail, ensuring that the ski resort would be an unwelcoming environment for her. I contacted the resort under the guise of a concerned husband, voicing complaints about the service and insisting on specific arrangements that would guarantee discomfort. I wanted to make sure that Derek would be involved in her experience, and I made a few well-placed calls to ensure that he would be her guide. During her stay, as I sat in the dim light of our living room, I couldn't help but replay the moments leading to her infidelity over and over in my mind. The laughter we shared, the late-night conversations, and the dreams we built together now felt like a cruel joke. I was left to grapple with the reality that while I was planning revenge, she was preparing for her escape, a trip that was supposed to be filled with joy and exhilaration. I had always known that Jessica loved skiing. It was one of the passions that initially drew us together. Our first trip to the mountains had been magical. We had spent hours on the slopes, laughing and teasing each other, the cold air invigorating our spirits. But now I could only envision her sliding down those slopes, her laughter echoing in my ears, tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. The night before her departure, I could barely sleep. I watched her pack, a mixture of excitement and oblivion radiating from her. She hummed softly to herself, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I could see her selecting her favorite ski jacket, the vibrant red, one I had bought for her birthday. It stung to think that she would wear it while gliding down the slopes, perhaps even with Derek by her side. "Are you ready for your trip?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, masking the turmoil within me. "Absolutely. I can't wait to hit the slopes again," she replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I forced a smile, but inside I felt a tumult of anger and grief. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how deeply she had hurt me, but I held my tongue. I had a plan. I had to stick to it. The morning of her trip arrived with a crisp chill in the air, the kind that hinted at winter's full embrace. I watched as she loaded her luggage into the car, the excitement radiating from her as she chatted about the friends she would meet at the resort. I felt the bitterness rise in my throat. How could she be so carefree after what she had done? Once she left, I took a moment to gather myself. I needed to remain calm and focused. I had set my plan into motion, but I also had to ensure that I was ready for anything. I decided to drive to the resort a few hours away to confirm that everything was in place. I needed to see for myself that Derek was there and that my plan would unfold as intended. The drive was agonizing. Each passing mile felt like a reminder of the life I had built with Jessica, a life that now felt like a fragile facade. As I approached the resort, I could see the snow-covered peaks in the distance, majestic and inviting, yet I felt only dread. This was the place of her betrayal, the backdrop to her deceit. Upon my arrival, I checked into a nearby hotel under an alias. I wanted to keep my distance while still being close enough to monitor her. The resort was bustling with activity, the air filled with laughter and the sounds of skis carving through fresh snow. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I was here to execute my plan, to ensure her getaway turned into a nightmare. I made my way to the main lodge where I knew Derek would be. I had already made arrangements with a few staff members, discreetly informing them of my situation and asking for their cooperation. As I entered the lodge, I spotted Derek at the reception desk, his charming smile making him all the more infuriating. He was everything I was not: confident, outgoing, and seemingly magnetic. I could see why Jessica had been drawn to him. I approached the desk with a casual demeanor, asking about ski rentals and lessons, all while keeping an eye on Derek. I needed to gauge his character to understand the man who had taken my wife into his arms. As I engaged in small talk, I carefully dropped hints about Jessica's arrival, feigning excitement about her upcoming trip. I could see the flicker of recognition in Derek's eyes as I mentioned her name. "Oh, Jessica. Yes, she's a great skier," he replied, a smirk creeping onto his face. "We had a lot of fun last time she was here." A surge of anger coursed through me. I forced a smile, masking the rage that threatened to boil over. I hope she has a good time, she deserves it. Absolutely, we'll make sure she has a blast, he said, completely unaware of my true intentions. As I left the lodge, I felt a sense of satisfaction mixed with unease. I had planted the seeds of chaos. I had ensured that Derek would be present, ready to greet her with open arms when she arrived. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to make sure that the experience would be anything but pleasant. I spent the rest of the day crafting an elaborate plan to sabotage her trip. I spoke to the staff and subtly encouraged them to treat her differently, less attention, longer waits, and minor inconveniences that would pile up and sour her experience. I wanted her to feel isolated, to realize that her choices had consequences. As night fell, I returned to my hotel room, feeling a mix of exhilaration and dread. I had set everything in motion, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into dangerous territory. Would this truly satisfy me? Would it bring me peace, or was I simply setting myself up for more pain? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with my thoughts. I had justified my actions, but deep down, I knew there was a line I was crossing. Revenge was a double-edged sword, and while I wanted to hurt her, I also feared what this would mean for me. As I closed my eyes, I could only imagine how her first day at the resort would unfold. Would she notice the tension in the air? Would she feel the weight of her choices? I felt a thrill at the thought, but it was immediately followed by a wave of nausea. Tomorrow would be the beginning of her nightmare, and I was ready to watch it all unfold. The morning of Jessica's arrival at the ski resort dawned cold and clear. I could feel the tension in my chest as I awoke, the anticipation of the day ahead stirring a mix of excitement and dread. I had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying every detail of my plan in my mind. I knew I had to keep my emotions in check. I was on a mission to make her pay for her betrayal. I arrived at the resort early, the sun just peeking over the mountain peaks, casting a golden hue over the snowy landscape. I felt a strange sense of power as I walked through the lodge, the place bustling with guests eager for the day's adventures. I made my way to the reception desk, where I had arranged for the staff to be prepared for Jessica's arrival. "Good morning. Is everything set for Jessica?" I asked, feigning casual interest. "Yes, we have her room ready, and she'll be greeted by Derek when she arrives," one of the employees replied with a nod. I felt a surge of satisfaction at the thought of Derek being the first person she encountered. I could already envision the awkwardness that would ensue, the tension that would fill the air between them. I wanted her to feel that discomfort, to be reminded of the choices she had made. As I wandered the resort, I considered the various ways I could amplify her experience of discontent. I approached the ski rental shop, casually chatting with the staff. I mentioned Jessica's name, ensuring they would be aware of her arrival, and subtly suggesting that they might want to take their time with her rental process. A few knowing glances exchanged between the staff told me they understood the assignment. I spent the morning exploring the slopes, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the gnawing sense of guilt that lingered beneath my anger. Was I truly the victim here, or was I becoming something darker, something more vindictive? I tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the satisfaction I would feel when Jessica experienced the fallout of her choices. Around mid-afternoon, I made my way back to the lodge. I positioned myself strategically in a corner, where I had a clear view of the entrance. My heart raced as I awaited her arrival. I watched as families and friends came and went, laughter ringing through the air, but my focus was solely on the door. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spotted her. Jessica walked through the entrance, her face glowing with excitement, her vibrant red ski jacket standing out against the white backdrop of the resort. She looked beautiful, and for a moment I felt a pang of longing, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger that had driven me here. Derek was right behind her, a broad smile plastered on his face as he greeted her with a casual hug. I felt a rush of jealousy and rage as I watched them interact. There was an ease between them that made my blood boil. I forced myself to stay calm, reminding myself of the plan I had set in motion. As they moved toward the reception desk, I leaned in closer, straining to hear their conversation. I could see the excitement in Jessica's eyes as she spoke to Derek, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. This was the man who had taken her from me, who had stolen the warmth of our relationship and turned it into something cold and bitter. "Welcome back, Jessica. I hope you're ready for some great skiing," Derek said, his tone light and friendly. "Absolutely. I can't wait to hit the slopes again," she replied, her enthusiasm radiating off her. I watched as they continued to chat, Derek effortlessly drawing her into conversation while I stood in the shadows, a silent observer of my own life. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and unease. This was what I wanted, her to be uncomfortable, to feel the weight of her choices, but part of me struggled with the reality of it all. As they finalized her check-in, I noticed the staff subtly dragging their feet. I had made sure they would take their time, and I could see Jessica's smile faltering as she waited. The longer she stood there, the more apparent her irritation became. I felt a flicker of satisfaction at the sight. She had to know that this was just the beginning. Once Jessica received her room key, I decided it was time to make my move. I approached her with a casual demeanor, putting on a mask of indifference. "Hey there, enjoying the resort?" I asked, forcing a smile. She turned, surprise flashing across her face. "Oh, I didn't expect to see you here." I noticed the moment of panic in her eyes, the way she quickly composed herself, but I could see through the facade. "Just wanted to make sure everything was perfect for you," I replied, my tone light but laced with an undercurrent of tension. "Thanks, it's so good to be back," she said, but I could see the uncertainty lingering beneath her excitement. "Derek is going to show you around, right? He's a great guy," I added, watching her expression closely. "Yes, he is," she replied, her voice slightly strained, and I could sense the discomfort creeping in. The tension between us was palpable, and I reveled in it. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, to realize that every decision had consequences. As I stepped away, I could see her trying to shake off the unease. I wanted to ensure that the discomfort continued to build throughout her stay. I had set things in motion, and now it was time to let the chaos unfold. I spent the rest of the afternoon lurking around the resort, keeping an eye on Jessica and Derek as they made their way to the slopes. I could see them from a distance, and I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as I watched her excitement gradually fade into uncertainty. As they began skiing, I made my way to the lodge's bar, where I could keep an eye on the slopes while nursing a drink. I wanted to be close enough to witness her growing discomfort, to see the realization dawn on her that this trip was far from the joyful getaway she had envisioned. As evening approached, I knew I had to escalate my plan. I contacted the hotel staff again, ensuring they would deliver a series of minor inconveniences to her room: broken heating, a messy housekeeping job, and perhaps even a few complaints about noise from nearby guests. I wanted her to feel isolated, to suffer just as I had suffered. The thrill of planning her discomfort was intoxicating, but I couldn't shake the nagging doubts that lingered in the back of my mind. Was I losing myself in this quest for revenge? Would this truly bring me the closure I sought, or was I simply digging myself deeper into a pit of resentment? As the sun set over the mountains, casting a vibrant orange glow across the sky, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Tomorrow would be another day, and I was ready to watch Jessica's world unravel. The following day dawned with a biting chill in the air, the kind that clung to your skin and seeped into your bones. I awoke with a sense of anticipation, the thrill of my plan driving me out of bed. Today was the day I would ensure that Jessica truly felt the consequences of her actions. After a quick breakfast at my hotel, I made my way to the resort, my heart racing with the knowledge that I was about to witness the fallout of my orchestration. I arrived at the lodge, where skiers were bustling about, excited for a day on the slopes. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, reminding myself of my purpose. This was not just about revenge. It was about making her understand the gravity of her betrayal. As I entered the lodge, I spotted Derek interacting with guests, his charm on full display. I couldn't help but feel a pang of anger as I watched him. He was everything I wasn't: confident, magnetic, and seemingly carefree. I had to remind myself that today was about Jessica, not him. I needed to focus on her experience and how I could amplify her discomfort. I decided to check in on the staff I had spoken to earlier. I wanted to make sure they were still on board with my plan. I approached one of the employees, a young woman named Sarah who had been particularly receptive to my requests. "How's it going with Jessica? Any issues yet?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Oh, she seems to be having a rough start," Sarah replied, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "We had some heating issues in her room last night and she called down about the noise from the neighboring guests." A smile crept across my face. "Perfect. Make sure to keep it up. I want her to feel like she's in a different world than the one she expected." As Sarah nodded in agreement, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I was getting under her skin, and it was only the beginning. I made my way outside, where I could see the slopes filled with skiers. I spotted Jessica and Derek at the top of a run, preparing to descend. I positioned myself strategically at the base of the slope, waiting to see how things would unfold. When they started their run, I watched intently, noting the ease with which they navigated the course. Jessica was a skilled skier, but I could see the tension in her movements. She was trying to have fun, but the shadow of her choices loomed over her. As they reached the bottom, I caught sight of Jessica's expression, a mixture of excitement and unease. Derek was animated, chatting her up, but I could see her smile falter as they approached the lift line. I felt a thrill at seeing her discomfort. This was what I wanted. I needed her to realize that every choice had a consequence. After a few runs, I decided it was time to escalate things further. I found my way to the ski rental shop and approached the staff once again. "Have you had any complaints about Jessica yet?" I asked, feigning concern. "Just a few. She mentioned the equipment wasn't fitting right," one of the staff members replied. "We're trying to help her out, but it seems like she's not happy." "Good. Make sure she knows that we're doing our best, but remind her that sometimes things don't go as planned," I said, my voice laced with intent. "I want her to feel the pressure." With that, I headed back towards the slopes, eager to see how my plan would unfold. I watched as Jessica and Derek took another run, Jessica's frustration becoming more apparent. Each time they returned to the base, I could see her trying to put on a brave face, but the cracks were beginning to show. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction at her struggle. As the day progressed, I continued to monitor their interactions, waiting for the right moment to intervene. I noticed that Jessica was becoming increasingly frustrated with Derek, trying to maintain a facade of enjoyment while dealing with the mounting inconveniences. Each minor setback, the faulty equipment, the long waits for the lifts added to her stress, and I reveled in it. By late afternoon, I decided to make my presence known again. I approached them as they returned from another run, feigning concern. "Hey, how's it going? Enjoying the slopes?" I asked, my voice casual. Jessica turned to me, her smile forced. "It's been interesting," she replied, her eyes darting to Derek for support. Derek chimed in, "We've had a few hiccups, but it's all good fun, right?" His casual demeanor only fueled my anger. I wanted to lash out, but I held back, keeping my composure. "Just remember, it's all part of the experience," I said, my tone laced with a hint of menace. "Sometimes things don't go as planned, you just have to roll with it." As I walked away, I could see the tension between them. Jessica's smile faded, and I felt a surge of triumph. I was getting under her skin, and it was exhilarating. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the snow, I decided it was time to implement the next phase of my plan. I made my way to the bar area where I could overhear conversations and gather information. I knew Jessica would be heading there soon, looking for a reprieve from the day's chaos. When she and Derek finally arrived, I watched as they settled into a booth. I could see Jessica's frustration boiling over as she recounted her day to Derek. I strained to hear their conversation, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. "I just don't think I'm cut out for this anymore," Jessica said, her voice tinged with annoyance. "The equipment was terrible and the service has been awful." Derek tried to reassure her, but I could see the strain in his expression. "It happens. Just give it some time. We can try again tomorrow." I felt a rush of satisfaction at the sight of her dissatisfaction. This was what I wanted, her to feel trapped in a situation of her own making. As I sipped my drink, I couldn't help but smile at the unfolding drama. But then something shifted. I noticed Jessica's eyes scanning the room and I realized she was looking for me. I quickly ducked behind a pillar, my heart racing. I had been so caught up in my plan that I hadn't considered how she might react if she saw me. From my hiding spot, I watched as she leaned closer to Derek, her expression shifting from frustration to concern. "Do you think he's following me?" she asked, her voice low. Derek looked perplexed. "Who? Your husband? Why would he do that?" "I don't know. It just feels like he's always around," she replied, her tone laced with anxiety. I felt a mix of satisfaction and unease at her words. Had I gone too far? Was I truly becoming the villain in this story? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I had wanted her to feel discomfort, but I hadn't anticipated that she would start to feel hunted. As I watched their interaction unfold, I knew I had to be careful. My plan was working, but the last thing I wanted was for Jessica to become paranoid or overly anxious. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, but I didn't want to lose control of the situation. With that realization, I decided to step back for a moment. I needed to give her space to process what was happening without me hovering in the shadows. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the purpose behind my actions. Tomorrow would be another day, and I was determined to see this through. But for now, I would let Jessica stew in her own discomfort, letting her experience the consequences of her betrayal unfold without my direct interference. As I left the bar, I felt a mix of triumph and trepidation. I had set my plan in motion, but now I had to navigate the complexities of my own emotions. Revenge was a slippery slope, and I had to be careful not to lose myself in the process. The next morning came with a heavy silence that lingered in the air. I awoke feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Today was crucial. I could sense that the tension between Jessica and Derek was mounting, and I was eager to see how far I could push her discomfort. The thrill of my plan was still intoxicating, but the weight of my actions was beginning to settle in. I made my way to the resort early, the crisp mountain air biting at my cheeks. As I arrived, I spotted Jessica and Derek in the distance, standing outside the lodge, bundled up in their ski gear. I could see the tension in Jessica's posture. She was crossing her arms, her expression a mix of frustration and uncertainty as she spoke to Derek. I felt a flicker of satisfaction at the sight, but it was quickly overshadowed by a pang of guilt. Was I truly enjoying this? I pushed those thoughts aside as I made my way to the ski rental shop again. I had one more trick up my sleeve to ensure Jessica's experience was as miserable as possible. I approached one of the staff members, a man named Tom, who had been particularly sympathetic to my cause. "I need you to give Jessica the worst rental equipment you have," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Make it obvious that it's subpar. I want her to really feel the difference." Tom raised an eyebrow, but I could tell he was intrigued. "You got it. I'll make sure she gets the least of what we have." As I walked away, I felt a surge of excitement. This was the final push I needed. I wanted her to feel the weight of her decisions, to realize that her choices had consequences. I wanted her to understand that the thrill of her affair had led her to this moment of discomfort and chaos. I made my way outside, positioning myself near the base of the slopes where I could see Jessica and Derek prepare for their day. I watched as they approached the rental desk together, Jessica's expression a mix of determination and trepidation. When she received her equipment, I could see her brows furrow in confusion. The gear looked old and worn, and I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction at the sight. As they began their runs, I kept a close eye on them from my vantage point. I could see Jessica struggling with the equipment, which was clearly not suited for her skill level. Her frustration was palpable, and I reveled in it. This was what I wanted, her to feel the consequences of her choices. Derek, ever the supportive companion, tried to encourage her, but I could see the strain in his demeanor as he watched her struggle. It was clear that he was starting to feel the weight of the situation as well. I felt a mix of satisfaction and unease as I observed their interactions. Jessica's frustration was becoming evident, and I knew I had to keep pushing. After a few runs, I decided to make my presence known again. I approached them as they took a break at the base of the slope. "Hey, how's it going?" I asked, my voice casual but laced with an undercurrent of tension. Jessica looked up, her expression tight. It's been challenging, she admitted, her voice strained. Challenging? You're an excellent skier. What's going on? I pressed, feigning concern while secretly enjoying her discomfort. Derek chimed in, the equipment is a bit rough, but we're making it work. There was an edge to his voice, a hint of frustration that made me smile inwardly. Just remember, it's all part of the fun, I said, trying to sound lighthearted. Sometimes the best memories come from the toughest experiences. I could see Jessica's jaw tighten at my words, and I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the realization that her choices had led her to this uncomfortable situation. I wanted her to feel trapped, to understand the weight of her betrayal. As they prepared to head back up the lift, I decided to drop one final bomb. Oh, by the way, I heard from some of the staff that there's been some trouble with the lifts today. You might have to wait a while, I said, my tone casual but my heart racing. Jessica shot me a look of disbelief, her frustration boiling over. Are you serious? She snapped, her eyes narrowing. This trip is turning into a disaster. I could see the realization dawning on her face that I had orchestrated this entire experience. In that moment, a mix of triumph and guilt washed over me. I had succeeded in making her uncomfortable, but at what cost? Was this truly what I wanted? As they headed up the lift, I felt the weight of my actions settle in. I had pushed her to the brink, but I was also losing sight of my own humanity. Revenge had consumed me, and I was beginning to wonder if it was worth it. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself wandering the resort, lost in thought. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was becoming the very thing I despised. I had wanted to make her feel the consequences of her choices, but I was also starting to feel the burden of my own actions. When evening fell, I returned to my hotel room, feeling drained and conflicted. I had set out to ruin her trip, but now I was left grappling with the realization that my quest for revenge was taking a toll on my own soul. I had become so consumed with pain that I was losing sight of who I was. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would Jessica confront me? Would she realize the extent of my involvement? Or would she continue to suffer in silence, trapped in a situation of her own making? I had to face the reality that the nightmare I had created was not just hers, it was mine as well. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and I had to decide whether I would continue down this path of destruction or find a way to break free from the cycle of revenge. The next day dawned with an eerie calm, the sun shining brightly over the snow-covered peaks. I awoke feeling a strange mix of anticipation and dread. I had spent the night tossing and turning, grappling with the consequences of my actions. The thrill of revenge had dulled, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease. I had pushed Jessica to her limits, but at what cost? As I prepared for the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that the reckoning was coming. I had orchestrated her discomfort meticulously, but the weight of guilt hung heavily on my shoulders. I needed to decide if I would continue this path of cruelty or confront the mess I had created. When I arrived at the resort, I immediately headed to the lodge, my heart racing. I spotted Jessica sitting alone at a table, her expression a mix of frustration and fatigue. She looked worn down, her usual sparkle dulled by the weight of the previous days. I felt a pang of regret as I watched her, but I quickly pushed it aside. I was here to see this through. As I approached her, I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Hey, how's it going? Enjoying the trip?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. She looked up, her eyes narrowing as she recognized me. "You know it's been a disaster," she snapped, her voice laced with irritation. "The equipment was terrible, the service has been awful, and I can't even enjoy the skiing anymore." I felt a rush of satisfaction at her frustration, but it quickly faded as I realized the deeper implications of her words. "It's all part of the experience, right?" I replied, trying to maintain my facade. "Don't give me that," she shot back, her voice rising. "You've been behind this, haven't you? You've made this trip a nightmare on purpose." Her accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. I had wanted her to feel the consequences of her choices, but now I was faced with the reality of what I had done. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and I felt the weight of my actions crashing down on me. Jessica, I started, but she cut me off. No, you don't get to play the victim here. You've been watching me suffer, and for what? To make me feel guilty about something I already regret. Her voice trembled with emotion, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes. In that moment, I realized that I had lost sight of everything I had once loved about her. I had become so consumed by my need for revenge that I had forgotten the person I was hurting. I wanted you to understand how much you hurt me, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. By ruining my trip, by making me miserable, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. You think this is going to make me realize something? It's only making me feel more alone. I felt a wave of shame wash over me. I had wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, but instead I had pushed her away. I never wanted you to feel alone, I said, my voice trembling. I just wanted you to see what you've done. Jessica looked at me, her expression softening slightly. You think I do know? I made a mistake and I'm paying for it, but this isn't helping either of us. Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had been so focused on my revenge that I had forgotten the complexity of our relationship, the love that still lingered beneath the surface. I had allowed my anger to blind me, and now I was faced with the reality of what I had done. I'm sorry, I said, feeling the sincerity of my words. I wanted you to feel what I felt, but all I've done is push you away. I never wanted things to get this bad. Jessica took a deep breath, her expression shifting from anger to something softer. I know I hurt you. I'm sorry for that, but this isn't the way to fix things. We need to talk, really talk, about what happened and how we can move forward. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the turning point we needed. I had spent so long plotting her downfall that I had forgotten the essence of our relationship: communication, understanding, and love. We had both made mistakes, but perhaps we could start to heal. Let's get out of here, I suggested, my voice steady. We can go for a walk away from all this chaos. She nodded and we both stood up, the tension between us still palpable but softened by the prospect of a genuine conversation. As we walked outside, the crisp air hit us, and for the first time in days I felt a sense of clarity. We made our way to a quieter part of the resort, away from the crowds and the noise. I could see the beauty of the snow-covered mountains surrounding us, a stark contrast to the turmoil we had been experiencing. Jessica, I began, my heart racing. I've been so focused on my anger and my need for revenge that I lost sight of what we had. I want to work through this, but I need you to be honest with me about everything. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. I will. I know I made a terrible mistake and I want to make things right. But we both need to put in the effort to rebuild what we had. As we stood there, surrounded by the breathtaking beauty of the mountains, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had both been through the ringer, but perhaps this was our chance to start anew. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was a journey I was willing to take if it meant reclaiming the love we once shared. As we walked back toward the lodge, the sun shining brightly above us, I felt a sense of determination wash over me. The nightmare I had created was not just Jessica's, it was mine as well. But together we could find a way to heal, to move forward, and to rebuild our relationship stronger than before. In that moment, I realized that love, while complicated, was worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other after all. With a deep breath, I took her hand, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together.